There he is, unmuted. Unmuted.
Can you hear me?
It might be the fangs.
Yeah, it's hard being a vampire. I'll take this off, okay?
All right.
Oh, look
That's great.
We have our opening bit.
and I'll take these out.
You can leave those in.
So we finally get to talk to you. Joe and I have been running the Zandor Vorkov Plastic Fang Society page for, it's probably been 10 years now, right? For a long time, we get people, I guess they think that we're Zandor Vorkov. And of course, we tell them we're not, and we don't know how to get a hold of him, but
Yeah. Hey, if it helps me with the ladies, I'll tell them I'm Zandor Vorkov. That's fine.
Zandor is the name given to me by Forey Ackerman, Zandor Vorkov.
All right, well, good evening, weirdos, and welcome to yet another edition of Livin' Cruddy with Cruddy Joe. I am, of course, Cruddy Joe, and I'm here tonight with the Getty Along gang. We have handsome Jimmy Hansen, Gino Royd Coffinberry, and our very special guest, perhaps the most underappreciated vampire in cult movie fandom, Mr. Zandor Vorkov. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
He had his fangs on earlier, but you all missed that. Sorry. Yeah. That was in the director's cut. That's for the privileged audience.
okay, so rewind back to the beginning here for me anyway, where the interest in this lifelong pursuit of finding out who Zandor is and where all this goes. When I was a kid, we had creature features. This is going back to mid-early 70s maybe. And you would see the traditional Dracula movies, Universal movies. You'd have Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman. And in my mind, all those movies were the same thing. You had Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr. And then at one point, and this is probably 75 or 76, I'm looking at a TV guide and Dracula versus Frankenstein comes up. And I'm like, oh, I've never heard of this one before. This has got to be the greatest of all the movies. It says in there, it features Lon Chaney Jr. I'm like, okay, well, this is legit one of these movies, not having any background on it. So I believe it was an afternoon creature feature, but I tuned into it. And within about 5 minutes, I wasn't exposed to a lot of things that scared me that much. The black and white movies were not scary at all. This movie scared me because it was very in your face, very loud. They had that crazy, really loud theremin. Then here comes Dracula, and this is a new Dracula. This is not Bela Lugosi or Carradine or anybody who's a little bit safer. This was a young guy who looked like he could have been right outside the house at that time. So this movie kind of scared me as a kid. I didn't get the gist of Al Adamson. I didn't know anything about that stuff. All I know is I attempted to watch this movie probably 3 times in a row and could not make it to the end because I got too scared by what was going on with Dracula and Frankenstein and the characters within. Finally, maybe after about 7 or 8 years, I made it through a showing. From that point on, I always looked around. There was no internet back in the day. So you're like, oh, what other movies is Zandor Vorkov in? Didn't appear in anything. I get the Ed Naha book, look through every movie listed in the horror catalog. Nothing else listed Zandor Vorkov. So there's this scary guy who came and went with one movie. And until the internet came around, even then, the information is quite limited. All you got in more recent years was Zandor Vorkov was a guy who had something to do with the production. He knew Al Adamson, various stories about him being an accountant or whatnot. But that Zandor Vorkov didn't really talk about it much. Here we are in 2020. This is going on 50 years later. We're finally catching up with Zandor Vorkov. To me, this is a treat. So I'd like to hand it off to Zandor to just get a little input on what all that was and why you didn't really pursue any notoriety or anything in those years.
Well, it's interesting, and not to mess with what you just said, I made a second movie for Al and Sam called Brain of Blood.
Right.
A smaller role, probably a more theatrical role. And fortunately, it didn't get a lot of pizzazz around me because the way I looked, I would have probably considered a terrorist by today's standards. I had the beard and the thing, and when I look at it, I go, geez, I'm glad it's not on my driver's license or something. But yeah, in terms of that, I've given, I've given a number of interviews in the last 4 or 5 months due to something I'll talk about in a moment. And the story is pretty much the same. I did this as a favor. I wasn't an accountant. I wasn't a stockbroker. I had a family friend who was a stockbroker, and when I was introduced to Sam and Al, I was a young man back from Vietnam safely. I didn't join, I was taken. You know how that works.
Right.
And I had a lady friend in New York, so that's where I came back. And she lived in the Village. She was a well-known television actress. And after I stabilized, I went looking for people and work. I had a friend who ran an agency, and she introduced me to a man named Gary Katz. Gary Katz ran Bobby Darin's music publishing business in New York while he was out in Vegas. Gary Katz ultimately produced Steely Dan, Jim Croce, Ricky Lee Jones, and a ton of other people. And he took me under his wing, and I kind of hung out with him, and I got to see things. And I had a really good ear for music, so I was able to point to things, and you know, it was kind of fun. I ended up meeting a good friend of his. They're all from Brooklyn, you know, these guys. The most notable, other than Gary as a producer, was Jay and the Americans. You know that name?
Mm-hmm.
A couple of big hits. And so I met Shelley. Shelley was huge. He was a very funny guy. Anybody who tried to have lunch with him couldn't do it because you'd laugh so much you'd choke. He was funded into a record store in the Village, and somehow I ended up working with him and running this store and a few other stores. And a guy walks in one day, and he's, you know, kind of looking at records, and he kept looking at me, and he came up and he said, "I want to talk to you." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "You got a real gift for gab. You make people laugh. People are like, you're bopping and you know stuff. You can't be making any money. You want to make some money." And I said, "Legally?" And he said, "Could be." And so he was a guy who put together deals on Wall Street. He put people together. So he kind of gave me a little bit of information. Ultimately, I met some people that introduced me to Sam Sherman, who was the producer of all of Al Adamson's films, and his partner. And he was just a dynamo. He and I have been friends for all these years. There's nothing he doesn't do. He edits, he produces, he writes, he promotes. He has a huge reputation in the past. And so they said, "We're looking to raise money to do our own film distribution, because the distribution business in film and records is where the money is." So I said, "All right, I know a couple of people. Let's see what we can do." And I was looking to get a cut of something because I was just back from a war that I made it through. I looked this way, only my hair wasn't salt and pepper. It was very black. And my hair was longer and the beard was the same. So I would meet Sam and Al. Al would come from Hollywood and Sam would come, I think, from Long Island. And we would meet for a couple of hours in the city and we talk about what was going on. So after about 3 or 4 of these things, they showed up one day and Al was very despondent. I didn't know much about what they did. I think they showed me one film and I went, "Ooh, boy." So I said, "What's going on?" And so Sam said, "Well, we had John Carradine for the last piece of a 3-movie thing we put together that we are going to call Dracula versus Frankenstein, but his agent's asking for more money and we don't do that. We have a fixed thing. We're trying to support old timers who were really great so they can pay their bills or their whatever. And Carradine, we've used a number of times, and his agent said we can't do it." So Al doesn't know what he wants to do. At which point, Al kind of turns, he's sitting next to me, and he turns to me and he goes, "You know what? He'll do it." And Sam says, "He'll do what?" "No, I have a feeling he can be the Dracula. We don't need Carradine. We've used him before." And Sam says, "What, are you kidding me? Everybody knows Carradine." So Al said, "Trust me, I have a feeling about this." And I said, "Gentlemen, I don't watch horror movies. I'm not into horror movies. Why me?" Al said, "Look, you do us a favor. favor. You know, we can't pay you much. We'll pay you X amount of dollars. We'll fly you out to Hollywood. I know your mother's down in Florida. You can go stop and see her. You can do anything you want. You'll never have to put your hand in your pocket to pay for anything. You'll live with me and my wife, and we'll take care of it, and you'll be surprised. So I took a breath, and I thought, this would be a great adventure. I mean, who gets a shot like this, whether I like it or not? I like acting. I tried it, so maybe this will lead to something. And that's what's happened.
That's great. That's a lot of insight.
Yeah.
I had heard that this was kind of a piecemeal movie that was joined together from a couple different things they were working on. And there was the movie that he was making with Lon Chaney Jr. with the Axe Killer. And then there was the little bits of Satan Sadist going on. I don't know how much of that stuff was intended to be woven together, but to add Dracula and Frankenstein into that mix that's I love it, but that's a crazy proposal. Let's go ahead and add Dracula and Frankenstein to this story. Did you get to work with Lon Chaney at all, or did that happen separately?
No, that was after the fact. I think John Bloom, who played the Frankenstein, and I were brought in afterwards. It basically, you know, again, it's a tribute to Sam Sherman, who the people who were backing, they had success with Satan Sadist, and they wanted to follow up, and they tried that, and that was, and then they tried something else, I don't know, something blood. Everything they did was about blood, you know, and curious where we are today, right?
Right.
That was kind of shelved by the people who were going to put up money, and Sam Sherman had been trained as a film editor, and he said, there's something about this. Let me take a look at this. So he went and started looking at it, and he noticed something that Nash said. He said something about, I'm not who you think I am. So he said, you know, I don't remember too many films that really had Dracula and Frankenstein fighting. So he said, what if this guy is actually Dr. Frankenstein in hiding, you know, on the pier in Long Beach with this crazy thing, taking blood and Chaney cutting off people's head. And if we add this element, so that's how I understood this thing was born. And so Sam pieced it together, wrote some dialogue, which was so hard to speak. I mean, I'm a reader. I read books. I know where commas are and periods are. And Sam wrote this very wild dialogue where I'd have to catch my breath between things. That, given all the other little goodies, made for a quirky film. And what you guys saw, you know, Gino, I heard what a number of people tell me what you said. They had seen all kinds of standard, well-done Dracula films. They were in a very narrow place, and they were what they were. I'll give you an example. The man who brought me out after 50 years, running away from Dracula chasing me, and all my friends said, why are you not accepting? You got people everywhere trying to get you to do things. I said, I did it as a favor. I don't like this kind of genre. I'm into art films. I work with kids. I do improv theater called playback theater, which is all over the world. And I said, you know, in all due respect, let me have my say. Well, David Gregory said the same thing to me when he was 8 or 9. He's British, and he and his young friend went to a video store, and virtually, if one believes this, the Dracula film jumped off the shelf to him. He took it home, they watched it, and David told me, this is what I want to do with my life. And he has done very successfully. 15 years in Hollywood, Severin Films. He and Sam got together. He redid all of Sam's 30-some independent international films, and David boxed them and sold out instantly, 30-some things. Do you know the story of what happened to Al? You must.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That was something. That was really something.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of tragedy around him, you know, between his wife and different things over the years. And
They were good people. They were very good people.
That's what I always heard, that both of them were really good people.
David brought me out because he tracked me down through my playback company in Asheville, North Carolina. And, I got this email and he said, I'm this person. I'm going to do a documentary on Al. I did something on Richard, I think his name is Anderson, who did the Isle of Dr. Moreau that had all kinds of problems. And he said, I'd really like to interview you for this film because you were very close. You played a significant part. And I said, what have you done? And he said, I did this. I said, send it to me. And my wife and I watched it, and we were very impressed with his craftsmanship. And so I said, since it's not about me, I'm up for it. It's about Al. It's someone I really know. He did a lot for a lot of people out there, gave a lot of people a break, so to speak. So he came with a really good cinematographer to my house in Charlottesville. They interviewed me for about 70 minutes, and at the end, we talked about Al's demise, and I started tearing up, and I took the microphone off, and he got up and gave me a hug. This is a guy I met an hour ago, and I said, this is a sensitive guy, and we'd done, he's English, so we went down and had tea. I said, so where do we go from here? And he said, well, hopefully this will come out for Halloween and we'll tour you and we'll do this. And I said, and 4 years later, I get an email from him saying, we finished the film, premiered in London and Canada, and we're going to premiere it in Hollywood. Please be our guest. And he flew my wife and myself out there to the Grauman's Egyptian. We go out there and we're in the Steven Spielberg Theater. He shows the film. We're sitting all the way in the back. We were very impressed about how well it was done. And he got 45 people he interviewed, and, it snapped, and it was really interesting. And at the end, it was about what happened to him. The movie is over, and whoever the host was brought David Gregory up on the stage and introduced him. And David took it there and said, we've got some of the people who worked with Al. We'd like to bring them to the stage so you can ask them questions. So he introduced all these folks, and he introduced me last, title or some text. When we were walking into the theater before, there was a very long line. I didn't pay much attention. It's a big theater. I think they had two. So I was, kind of caught up, and I hadn't been in Hollywood for many years. We go in, and so once he introduces me as Zandor Vorkov, all the heads in the room turn, and I hear, ooh, ah, I go, my wife looks at me and what is that? So I go up there, and they start asking questions. And as my wife tells me later, a good 50% were aimed at me, even though we were there for David's premiere. So everything's done, and some interesting things were said, very nice. And David thanked everybody, and he actually booked Dracula and Frankenstein as the second feature for people to watch. He said, enjoy the movie, we're going to go have dinner. As soon as he said that, half the audience got up and completely swamped me. Can we have your autograph? And I had, I'm a Vietnam vet with a bladder condition. And I told my wife at the end of the film before, I'm in trouble because I want to see the end, but I know I have to get up there. So I didn't go. So I figured, oh God, now what? So I go up there. And I got in a space and I started signing autographs for 20 minutes. And I finally said, hey, I got to pee. Somebody says, Dracula doesn't pee. And a very big guy said, this Dracula does. Make a path and let this man through. And he was a friend of David Gregory and an actor. And he said, I respect what you're doing. So it just kept going on. So being not a fan of this and not Dracula per se, I began researching Dracula and the whole archetype of what he represented and why people are so taken with this evil, dark persona. And look at the times we're living in, So I'm going, there's something else here. So I've actually written a multimedia performance piece that I have done some some interaction with a very talented professor of Slavic history who uses vampires and Dracula at the University of Virginia here. And we were all ready to go. He was getting me funding. He showed me 4 or 5 places we could do it. And then the pandemic happened. So I'm still looking at it. Well, a good friend of mine in Vermont who is very intuitive said, there's another film for you here. I don't know what it is. So let's explore this. So we're taking my multimedia rendition of what I call A New Dracula. Why me? And we're going to develop it into an in-your-face, prepared-to-be-surprised film that has nothing to do with the old archetype, but shows the transformation, period. Question. In your ability to look at websites and all of the fan stuff, are you aware what I did with the blood drive?
Yeah, I saw it. I saw that there was a PSA out there that you did for drive-in theaters, right?
Right. Because I did that PSA I have a man named David Sering, who was a big-time movie exec with one of the biggest AMC films or theaters or whatever, retired, and he and Sam Sherman are, in cahoots, and they realized with the pandemic that Zandor is the drive-in Dracula. And here we have nothing but drive-ins. I wonder if he'd be interested in doing something. And they pitched me, and I said, as long as it's not gory and it's fun. So David is really talented, and he and Sam put together some stuff. And they asked me if I would do this PSA. And my stepdaughter, who is very talented, and she's good with cinematography on her phone, her camera, they sent me a 3-minute script, and I did it as this PSA, and they sent it over to Severin Films, and they added some things from that. And it's kind of I am the Count of Darkness, the Lord of the Manor of Carpathia, and we're living in desperate times. We need your blood. And people, you kind of digest that. And then there's the vampire's oath of blood that I take people through. There's little cards, and they recite it, and they're indoctrinated into this safe blood-giving thing. And at the end, I look at the camera, and I tilt my head, and I say, please donate. This is not the image that people have of Dracula.
Right.
A nice guy who's, telling people. So when I was interviewed by the local newspaper, they ran a 2/3 front page of the entertainment section with me being filmed in that PSA holding the Famous Monsters magazine that I'm on the cover. And she wrote beautifully. And I'm thinking, this is a conservative newspaper. This PSA really means something to people. And I found that to mean a lot. So the last question she asked me in the interview is, one last question, Zandor, are you going to donate blood? And I said, I've done it before, I will. So they arranged for me to go to the big blood drive in Charlottesville with the American Red Cross, and they had CBS and NBC, and they all show up. And I sit and wait in costume with the mask that I was wearing. And I go up to the intaker, and they ask me all these questions, and they prick my finger, put a drop of blood on the slide, put it under, and then they go, oh. And I said, oh, what? You can't donate today. You're anemic. Which I knew I was. I've been mildly anemic for years. So the camera people are waiting, and they said, what's going on? And I said, you know what? They won't let me donate today because I'm anemic. You know why? I haven't taken any blood. I'm encouraging people to give blood. So what are we going to do? So that's how
drink it.
Right.
There is humor, which you guys seem to really appreciate. And my friends are looking to create a new Dracula. We're putting together some things, and we're hoping that there'll be people out there who will understand that in times of great change, we need to be able to roll with it and understand that if a guy like Dracula can say, I'm not taking blood, and encourage you to give blood, then anything is possible.
Right.
Definitely. Well, I think you have the ability to leverage that. People do, and I'm not saying the whole world keeps up with this stuff, but there is a group of people who, once you mention that Zandor Vorkov is involved, they are going to check this out. And then you have your target audience right there, people that can learn something. I think it's very cool.
Very much so.
I got a couple questions here, but I figured Joe had a couple things that he wanted to get out of the way.
Well, first off, did I understand? Were you pulling my leg about the Forrest Ackerman story about the name Zandor Vorkov?
No, he definitely made that up, and it's
Okay.
Zandor LIVIN. He was prominent in New York. Dark for real, not Bram Stoker made up stuff. And LaVey, I think that Sam said it's out there somewhere in many of the stories told by Sam or me. We're both storytellers. So that's really...
I've heard that story several times about Forey coming up with that name. It's great lore and it's true.
Great lore and it's true. Do you still have Zandor's infamous ring?
No, Sam's cousin was a jeweler, I think, in New York, and he designed that for this. And every day the shoot was over, he came and pulled it off my finger because I promised that it would be safe. And then Sam told me after all of this was done, someone stole it from him or stole it from the jeweler.
Oh, Lord.
David Sering, the man who's a really good promoter of me and this whole Drive-In Dracula, has made a bunch of things, and he sent me a copy he had someone make. It's a cast of something. It's heavy wax or something, and I wear it for appearances, and ultimately, something may happen.
Well, I assume that was cast by Jeff Carlson, who was also a big Xander fan. He's part of the team that made some of your promotional items, somebody that I know.
Okay, you mentioned that, yeah.
Right. And that ring, and I've heard the story that after all that, there was a lot of fuss about the ring. And after all that, somebody broke into, I guess his name was Ruzi, broke into the house or the daughter's house. And whoever ended up with the ring probably didn't even know what they had. Whenever I get around people that start talking about Xander lore, that ring immediately comes up. That's a popular little iconic piece. It's probably sitting in some old lady's chest. A bunch of other weird stuff that
you think she broke in and did it? An old lady had the ability to do that?
I ended up in a pawn shop and she bought it for $30.
Yeah, hopefully she doesn't shoot herself with the lasers that come out of it.
Yeah. That is a great scene now. Dracula comes. J. Carroll Nash is like, oh, I'm not impressed with Dracula. If they burn something with that ring, it's like, oh, holy crap. Okay, right. That is hilarious. That scene is just...
Well, I think that ring would be very useful nowadays for solicitors, maybe Jehovah's Witnesses and Girl Scouts.
Just Girl Scouts, Joe.
When they run out of Samoas, they got to pay.
Well, I always wondered why they needed the comet that went by when Dracula could have just put the ring right up next to Frankenstein's little electrodes on his head. And
right.
Well, here's something that I was thinking, and I brought this up with Joe. He probably has forgotten. It's something to do with Lon Chaney in that role that has always kind of struck me as like the ultimate irony. Lon Chaney had done a lot of movies early on in the 30s, but he was still Creighton Chaney. He wasn't known, but he had done finally the film version of Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men.
Oh yeah.
In that book and in the movie, he has a puppy, and he's too simply can't keep the puppy alive. It's been years since I've seen that movie. I always thought there was a weird kind of dark irony that in the final scene in his last movie ever, which is your movie, Dracula versus Frankenstein, he's shot and killed, falls down, and then this puppy comes out, and the puppy lives, and it kind of bookends his career from his first popular movie to his final movie with this kind of meme with the dog that always struck me. And I had asked people about it for years if that was anything that anybody had ever thought about, man. And people just, they kind of blow it off. And I just wondered if that was anything you had ever considered.
No, the story with that was Al and Gina's puppy, Stoopy. And they loved that dog. And the story goes, you could not get that dog out of Al's arms. Always there, always there. And I don't know, since I wasn't yet to be part of that film when they shot that, if it was a preconceived or a momentary, the puppy jumped down that moment and ran. And David Gregory's documentary, Blood and Flesh, David has remastered all of Alan on Sam's film, especially the Dracula film, and he's added some bonus features with me for about 20 minutes, and it's addressed in there. He is releasing it. From what I understand, it's only available in the 34 collection that David put out of all of Al's films. From my understanding, they're all sold out. I don't know what they're going to do about the collection, but his assistant, who I'm in contact with on other things, said, they were planning to release it in October by itself, and they were planning to tour me with that release for all these conventions before the pandemic. So I don't know where it is, but that you'll get a lot more information. It's I've seen a copy of the remastered Dracula film, and it's really good, high def, Blu-ray, all of that. And 20 minutes of me, and David Gregory had someone who is a really interesting take on all the conversation about Al and his Schlockerama, and compares him to foreign film people, and a lot of people agree. So if you can get a hold of the Dracula versus Frankenstein remastered thing, you'll get a wealth of information. If you can get a hold of Severin Films and tell them, you've heard about this and how do you get copies of the new Dracula film that you've remastered.
Was it a surprise when you finally saw the movie that your voice was put in with the delay with an echo?
The whole thing was a surprise. Basically, that was Sam. Sam is just full of energy, and we're out there doing stuff, and he say, wait, we cut. Come here, I got an idea. They put a light under me. We're going to put this light under you, Drac, and it's going to make you look really evil. So we start, action, we start doing it. It is so bright, and I'm moving, and all of a sudden I blink a couple of times. I said, do you guys see that I blinked? They said, oh yeah, no problem, we'll cut it. Did they? No. Same thing with the echo chamber. I don't remember it being at the beginning. It kind of was in the middle and toward the end, and it was like, oh my God, all of it added to what makes it so special. Having seen it a handful of times, and because people want to see it with me sitting in the room because it has a special thing. So for Halloween, friends and family would say, no, we want to see your film. And I said, make sure I've got my own bottle of wine. And, you laugh. I kind of got used to seeing the transitions of things, and I began to see what people are getting from it. For David Severin to say, this inspired me to get into this business, and go ahead, and he actually did it. And other people like yourself and a number of other people who said the same thing. I am very moved that it would have that kind of effect. So even though I said, not interested, thank you very much, not interested, I'm doing other things. After my experience in Hollywood, I was very glad to meet and greet people and talk to people and find out what's in it. Why do you like this? And Gino, you've given me some really good stuff. David gave me some good stuff, and it's going to factor into whatever we come up with in the coming months. And if we're able to put it out there for people to ponder, this is different. And the juxtaposition, very much like the PSA where Dracula is saying, donate blood. What's wrong with that picture? Wait a minute. The vampire say donate. Well, we're trying to, we're aiming for this, and to create something that people will understand there is the possibility of change, no matter how dark or heavy or weird, that people can change and we can change, and so on and so forth.
Excellent. Well, that's definitely something to look forward to. I definitely plan on following it, and hopefully that all comes to fruition. That will be great. You can definitely count on some promotion on this end, no matter what happens.
Thank you.
Do you have time to do some of our goofy music and quote quizzes?
I'm game.
I'll read off a couple lines of a lyric. You tell me the name of the song, the name of the band, and the next line. And then the next quiz is just a quote from a movie. Tell me what movie it was and who said it.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll start with the music ones. The lines are, your black cards can make you money, so you hide them when you're able. In the land of milk and honey. What's the next line?
I like to eat whatever's on the table. I have no idea. My wife probably would know. She's great.
You have a lifeline. You can reach out to either one of these guys and they can answer it for you, and you'll still get the points.
Handsome Johnny said, what was it?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Johnny don't know nothing. What is it?
Is Cruddy Joe's already passed on it. Okay, so the band is Steely Dan, which I brought up because, and that is the famous song "Do It Again." The line is, "You must put them on the table in the land of milk and honey." Okay.
Interesting.
So the next song is a little bit later in the musical period. The first three lines are, "Some say she's Mars or one of the 7 stars that shine after 3:30 in the morning." What's the next line and who is it?
James?
I don't know.
You don't know this, Jimmy?
No, I
The line is, "Well, she isn't," and that's Planet Claire by the B-52s.
You know Planet Claire.
We miffed on the music, right? This is a famous movie quote. "I never thought of myself as a freak, but you know how I love to freak."
I'm batting 1,000 in the wrong direction.
You can use a lifeline.
Come on, guys.
Come on, Joe.
Yeah, I'm thinking, but not much happening. Nope. That
I
one.
never thought of myself as a freak, but you know how I love to freak.
Nothing. I got nothing.
Joe's got nothing. All right.
Sorry.
That is Billy, Dennis Hopper, Easy Rider.
Wow.
And then the last one, this should be an easy one because it's a famous literary quote as well as a movie quote. And the quote is, "If the good Lord had intended us to walk, he wouldn't have invented roller skates." You want a lifeline?
Oliver Twist.
I'm getting blank stares from everybody here.
Willy Wonka.
It is Willy Wonka. So he got one.
Oh, good one.
On behalf of
Nice job, Joe.
Joe got the quote from Willy Wonka for you. All right, so 1 out of 3 is actually pretty good. That's about the going rate of everybody.
Quizzes are too hard.
I'm looking forward to see what your show looks like with all of this. This is a nice juxtaposition of stuff.
It's some guerrilla editing. It just very fast because we try to condense it down so there's not like big gaps where people aren't saying stuff. I know that you belong to an acting group. I'm wondering if you're willing to do a Werner Herzog impersonation for us.
No, I would not.
Oh, there goes. Every time they hear Werner Herzog, they start barking. All right, you guys be quiet. Nobody out there. All right, and the last bit, the final bit that I have, this is a bit of comedy. It's a kind of a... This is the goofiest thing ever. Joe is an author.
Okay.
He writes a Mad Lib, and basically what I'll do is I'll ask you for some adjectives and nouns and stuff, and then we'll create a little story based off of the feedback that you give us if you're willing to play, because he's written a story about Zandor Vorkov. I need an adjective.
Racy.
I need a video store chain.
Severin. I think
Severin.
they have their own online video store.
That works. A director who is not Al Adamson.
Ed Wood.
A name of a friend.
Paul.
That's my middle name, so that works.
Ah.
A name of a fast food restaurant.
McDoo-Doos.
McDoo-Doo. That works.
Pretty accurate, I think.
And what is Zandor Vorkov's favorite sitcom?
Currently, it's Frankie and Grace. It used to be the Golden Girls. Frankie and Grace.
All right. And finally, the last one, name of a type of fluid.
Blood.
Blood. That works.
Move.
Okay, yeah, I need a piece of furniture.
Bunk bed.
Bunk bed. That works. Here we go. This is Zandor Rents a Movie. But one racy night at home, Zandor decided he wanted to rent a movie. So Zandor went to the nearest Severin video store. Zandor wanted to rent a movie by his favorite director, but all the movies directed by Al Adamson had already been rented. So Zandor settled for a movie directed by Ed Wood. While checking out, Zandor ran into his annoying friend Paul. His car had run out of gas and they needed a ride home. After paying his exorbitant late fees, Zandor began driving home. Paul complained about everything. They complained about the traffic, how slow Zandor was driving. They even complained about the music on the radio. Then they started whining about being hungry, so Zandor drove them to McDoo-Doo's and gave them a knuckle sandwich. After dropping off his annoying friend, Xander went home to enjoy his movie. Once he got home, Xander put on a fancy fez, a smoking jacket, and Xander sat on the end of his bunk bed and he watched Frankie and Grace while nursing a crystal tumbler of blood.
That works.
That's what actually happened. That's an accurate retelling of last Thursday night.
Your movie, your next movie outlined right there.
Yeah, there it is.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I do have one more question, just of my own curiosity. Of your two collaborations with Al Adamson, which of the finished products do you personally prefer between Brain of Blood and Dracula vs. Frankenstein?
The one in the middle. I would say Dracula. Brain of Blood was a little extreme for me. I enjoyed what I did. And just a little footnote there. I'm in the passenger seat in a car chase down Mulholland Drive with a professional stunt driver and people protecting no traffic coming up. They go action, and this guy goes tearing down the drive. And I think if for a moment he wavered, and I really thought this was a real scene. I got the look on my face is for real. Yeah, I think Dracula, because of so much personal experience with it, and now what's happening with it.
Jimmy, do you have a cruddy cuisine real quick?
I was trying to remember if I made anything this week, but I don't think I did.
You made a frittata, right?
Yeah, you did make a frittata.
Yeah, okay. All right, I did make a frittata. But I make a frittata every week.
Well, give us 30 seconds of this.
All right, hold on. I tried to improve my pancake recipe this week. I'm making the same pancakes for the last 10 years for my kids. And instead of doing what I usually do, this week I separated the eggs and I took the whites, I put some sugar in and a little cream of tartar, and I whipped the shit out of them until I could hold them upside down in the bowl. And they were amazing.
And I still didn't get to sample nothing.
Wow, he changed his pancake batter mix. What I tell you about burning the candle at both ends? Can't live this. Have you worked at the Tower Records in Nashville?
Oh,
we ask all of our guests that question.
I'm glad you said that. Gino, you have a band, don't you?
I sure do, and Jimmy is our singer.
Oh, so how do I get to hear you guys?
How do you hear us? Reopen the Cruds. That would help everyone.
I actually have a couple videos that have little clips of Zandor in. I'll send you some.
Yes, they do.
I can attest to the fact that he is perhaps the #1 Zandor fan in the U.S., perhaps the world.
Perhaps the universe. Let's just go to the universe.
All right, Joe. Well, actually, Xander, do you have anything you want to promote real quick before Joe wraps this up?
No, everything is going to unfold the way I believe it's designed to unfold. Our thought forms are very powerful, and as we thinketh, so I try to thinketh a world at peace. And more and more people get out of the fear factor, which is kind of the idea of the film I'm thinking about, and I'm looking forward to more.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Xander. We appreciate it.
Welcome.
Yes, that's all we got for tonight, weirdos. First and foremost, I wanted to thank our very special guest, Zandor Vorkov, for his time and his insight. He has been more than enlightening, and I thank you, sir. Thank you so much for putting up with us. And I also would like to thank the Getty Along gang for getting along.
You're not going to say my name?
Yeah. I only say it in the beginning. You don't get it twice. I only get paid for once.
I'll wrap up. We'd like to thank handsome Jimmy Hansen for being handsome. We'd like to thank Cruddy Joe for being as cruddy as possible. And we specifically wanted to thank Zandor Vorkov for taking an hour with us to talk about Zandor Vorkov, Dracula vs. Frankenstein, Al Adamson, Brain of Blood, and all the cool stuff that we didn't know before. Thank you very much.
I am the Count of Darkness, the Lord of the Manor of Carpathia, and we're living in desperate times. We need your blood.
Once he got home, Xandor put on his fancy fez and smoking jacket, sat on his bunk bed, and he watched Frankie and Grace while nursing a crystal tumbler of blood.